This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me we're not telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Oh, God. You know, sometimes all you can do is laugh. They say laughter is the best cure for anything. So much of that is true. Especially when you see some of the dumbest, most dim-witted stuff. "13 years too late, ma'am. 13 years too late." It's going to be your hook for this week's podcast. If you can figure out what that's a reference to, it'll make the anticipation worth it. I honestly contemplated doing an entire Monday podcast where I just do a long-winded deep dive into the whole closing to that Elimination Chamber PLE. But I think I'm going to save that discussion until the end. You're going to get plenty of mixed bag opinions on that angle. To be honest with you, I'm still perplexed about the whole thing. Like, I know what I saw, but even as I observed it all unfold in front of my eyes, it still didn't really register to me like, wow, they actually were stupid enough to pull the trigger on this. That is mind-numbingly insane. So if you can hold on to your nutsack until the bitter end of the report, let me get the plugs out of the way and welcome everybody to what will probably end up being one of the strangest FSWR podcasts in history. And the only reason I say that is because I don't know how this one's going to turn out. I don't normally script any of my shows, aside from any notes that I take about the wrestling programs. I'll have a few talking points here and there just to make sure I don't miss any detail. But this is the Five Starr Wrestling Report for new and returning viewers. Welcome to the show. You are in for a big one. We are the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays to share my recaps and opinions on the wacky world of pro wrestling. We're mostly oriented toward classic content, as you can easily tell if you peruse the channel for more than 8 seconds. But I am still covering these WWE PLEs. For better or worse. Sometimes even I question why I still bother. At least this one's going to give us something to talk about extensively. And that was after I had already suffered through 3 hours of lousy wrestling matches. To be fair, the men's chamber wasn't bad. I think I was just kind of over it by the time we even got to that point. But anyway, make sure you subscribe, comment, leave a like down below for us. As the channel slowly grows and gains more exposure, I'm trying to push as much engagement as possible. I know the YouTube algorithms are always in flux. It used to be so simple back when subscriptions actually meant something. It was how you actually built your channel up. Now it's all about click-through rate and a bunch of other meaningless crap that has nothing to do with the actual viewing of the content. Since everybody now has the attention span of a squirrel with Down syndrome. You're off to a great start, I know. Already pushing buttons and saying politically incorrect stuff that I'll know will get me in trouble. Like I actually care. I'm just trying to hold back from saying a curse word in the first 10 minutes. Apparently that does actually get videos flagged. Or at least it does something in the algorithm to divert attention away from videos. As if YouTube actually gives a crap about graphic content or perverse language. Dude, if you've watched any of videos on the dark side of YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. But with that, what do you say we dive into the good stuff and try to break down exactly whatever in the hell it was I watched on Saturday night? This Elimination Chamber PLE from Toronto, Canada, at the Rogers Centre. 39,000 strong for this barn burner event. Didn't always sound like there were 39,000 people in the building. Especially during those two girls' matches. I could probably begin my venting by doing my bi-monthly "Here's Tommy to complain about there being way too much mediocre girls wrestling on WWE PLE's" rant. Is it even worth the rant anymore? I think I'm a broken record when it comes to dispensing my grievances on that topic. You know, I find it amusing when they talk about careers and lives being shortened inside the Elimination Chamber. Michael Cole says this like every year. Lives will be shortened. Careers will be jeopardized. Has anyone's career actually ever been legitimately shortened as a result of competing in chamber matches? I know it's just a general talking point to sell the danger of the gimmick, but like, I mean, when you hear the same thing every year, eventually you just start to tune it out or call BS on it. And of course, you know, now that they're having 5-foot, 90-pound girls competing in these fucking things, just weighs down the value of these supposed dangerous stipulation matches. And I'll be honest with you, you know, I tried to watch this women's chamber match objectively. But seriously, as soon as they played Alexa Bliss's music, I was like, oh, come on. Get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding? They actually put this girl inside the chamber. The puniest, most visibly unimposing female on the entire WWE roster. Like, I'm sorry, man. Believability goes completely out the window in situations like that. Of course, she wasn't the only problem in this match. Out of everyone involved, Bliss, Roxanne Perez, Bayley, Liv Morgan, Naomi, and Bianca Belair, Bianca was easily the most physically impressive out of everybody, right? Everyone else just looked like high school teenagers. By the way, someone help me out here. I don't watch Raw, so I have no idea what's going on with the current booking. What's this thing I heard the ring announcer say at the beginning? That the winner of this match faces either Rhea Ripley or Io Sky for the women's title at WrestleMania? I thought Tiffany Stratton held the other women's world title. Because there are still two main women's belts, right? There's a Raw belt and a SmackDown belt. How in the hell can you have Io and Rhea also be champions? What am I missing here? Is there a mysterious third women's belt that I'm completely overlooking? I know they have women's mid-card belts now. Yeah, doing a real banner job getting those fucking things over. You see why I don't bother covering much of the current product? 50-50 egalitarian equalist booking with men and women. The worst thing to ever happen to pro wrestling, dude. I'm serious. The minute women went from being an attraction to being given the same amount of equal screen time as the men, it's completely depleted my passion for the postmodern era of WWE. And by postmodern, I pretty much mean anything after the year 2015. It all began with the women's revolution, and it's been a steady decline from that point forward. So they finally rang the bell to start this fiasco after 20 minutes of ring entrances, because that's also a thing that plagues the modern product. 4-hour PLEs where half the fucking thing is just ring entrances and infomercials. It's ridiculous. And of course, the best part of the whole match was everything that happened in the first 5 minutes, at which point it rapidly fell off a cliff. And I've been moderately aware of the whole story they've been doing with Bianca, Naomi, and Jade Cargill. Supposedly, Jade was attacked in the parking lot some odd months ago. There's been speculation that Naomi was responsible for it, but they're trying to make it this elaborate who shot John fable. I guess hinting at the idea that Liv Morgan and Raquel Hernandez were the culprits, but it's all a big red herring, and it's clearly Naomi that initiated the attack. I mean, it's not a bad story. And I actually kind of dug what they did here because, at the same time, they pretty much established what the people already knew, that Naomi was the one that took out Jade. It didn't directly answer every question. Jade's clearly cognizant that Naomi attacked her, or at least that's what we're being led to believe. But because it wasn't a traditional heel turn where Naomi made it abundantly obvious that she did it, there's still room for guesswork. Keeps you wondering what they have yet to reveal in the whole saga. And Bianca's selling and reaction to everything was outstanding. Albeit a little silly in the sense that she's completely helpless after having been locked inside her pod. Like, she couldn't help make the save for Naomi as she's getting practically decimated by Jade. But, the officials never thought to just open Bianca's pod. Why was it so vital that they kept her locked inside the pod while her best friend was getting the shit kicked out of her? It's kind of a douchey thing to do on the referee's part. You know what I mean? The other thing, too, again, small little nag, but I think it's worth mentioning. The officials never thought to just shut the fucking cage door before Jade made her way inside. Think about it. There was no urgency or rush when Jade was coming down the aisleway. Took her a good 30 full seconds to actually get all the way down the ramp. That was plenty of time for them to shut the door and prevent Jade from meandering inside. But no, they just left the door open so she could kill Naomi. They're all standing around like, stop, no, please, you can't do that. Oh, well, too late. then it took security like another 3 full minutes to get down there and pull Jade back. Just a little bit of inconsistency with the structure to all this. And again, that's just an agenting issue more than anything. It's the problem with WWE now, where everything has to be milked and dragged out. Like, there's never a sense of urgency to attack angles or unplanned events. Just to give the illusion that, if I'm not quick and do what I need to do, I'm going to get flagged down by referees or security. Like, nowadays, you can beat the fuck out of someone for 10 minutes before someone tries to run out to help. Again, that's not Jade's fault. It's just the boneheads that are put in charge of booking this stuff. But again, I like that part of the match. The whole thing with Liv, though, like her acting all nervous and petrified as Jade was coming down, and then instead of Jade immediately going after Naomi in the cage, she hesitates by teasing that she's going to hit Liv, but then she just decks Naomi. And it's supposed to be a swerve. That part didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Why the need for the swerve? If Naomi was the culprit all along, and Jade knew that, why did you need the fake out with Liv? Unless it turns out she is somehow involved in the attack, and there's just more to the story that they need to explain. Once they shot the angle with Jade and Naomi, the rest of the match, I could kind of take or leave. Again, sorry, but for me, it's a visual thing. I mean, you're already corrupting the main course meal of the show by preceding the men's chamber with the women's chamber. It's an unnecessary hat on a hat. Now, how am I supposed to care about a gimmick match when you give it to me twice on one show? It's next to impossible. It's not special the second time around because I've already seen it. But then you factor in that half the talent pool in this thing are filled with chicks that are basically my size, if not smaller. And trust me, I am not a considerably big dude. Nor am I a trained athlete. I think out of all the girls involved, the only one that I might hesitate to pick a fight with is Bianca. Maybe Bayley, but I think I could even take Bayley if the chips were down. But Alexa, Roxanne, Liv, brother, please. It just makes the whole gimmick environment look so phony. Now, I'll say at least the right person went over. I was getting a little uneasy when it came down to Liv and Bianca at the very end. I was like, oh, for the love of God, please tell me Liv's not going to win this fucking match. Thank God she didn't. There were occasional spots and moments that didn't look horrendously bad. Not going to say it was the worst girls match I've ever seen. It just goes back to everything I've ever talked about with oversaturating the market. Muddying it up by needlessly giving the girls the same featured gimmick on these PLEs. Whether it's the Rumble, Money in the Bank, the Elimination Chamber, War Games. Every single time. It just takes me out of it. I cannot get behind this notion as a wrestling fan that just because the guys have a featured gimmick match, it means the girls should have one too. Why? Give me one valid reason that should ever be the case aside from egalitarianism. Because I'll tell you what, you ain't going to give me a valid answer. There is none. And if you have a problem with me saying that, too damn bad. Because it's true. I've said for years on this channel, women absolutely deserve to have a spot on the card when they've earned it. But we need to stop with this artificially contrived bullshit belief that women need equal amount of screen time as the men just because of the fact that they have vaginas and a set of boobs. Whether fans, old, young, male, female, want to admit it, professional wrestling has always been a form of programming by men, for men. Been that way since fucking 19th century carny shows and leading into the spread of the territory days. Women have been attraction pieces on many wrestling events throughout history. But they will never, and I repeat this, I emphasize, they will never be the kind of draws that the men are. No matter how many times WWE tries to force fit girls into main event spots or let them compete in these gimmick matches, the same ones that the boys do, just the reality of life. You can hate the delivery, but you can't deny the facts. So Bianca's going to WrestleMania to allegedly wrestle Rhea Ripley and or Io Sky and or whatever in the fuck is going on with their current women's title picture. Based on the face-off they shot at the end, it looked like Rhea was the one holding the championship, and Io was just kind of standing there in the middle. So, is it basically implied that it's going to be a three-way? Because they're telegraphing the hell out of that. Oh, great. Another reason for me not to care about watching a match. More three-ways and four-ways. Fucking laziest booking in the world. And mind you, this is coming from somebody who actually likes all three of these individuals as talents. But if you're telling me it's just going to wind up turning into a three-way with Rhea, Bianca, and Io, dude, I'll pass. Give me Bianca and Rhea in a singles match, and at least you could build a competent story around that. Throwing Io in there, it's just going to turn the whole thing into a cluster. I don't need to see that. Speaking of things I didn't need to see, yes, this actually happened. They tried to follow a 30-minute girls' elimination chamber match with, naturally, a girls' tag match. Because, of course they did. Are we watching WWE or fucking Shimmer? Christ only knows anymore. And there was more pink and glitter in the first hour of the show than I've seen in a Bath and Body Works commercial. Yeah, there's no way. Absolutely no way I was going to sit through this thing. Perfect break time segment for me to go get something to eat. If you care to know, the match is Tiffany Stratton and Trish Stratus versus Nia Jax and Candice LeRae. How in the fuck this is supposed to build hype for Tiffany versus Charlotte at Mania? Why this match needed to happen on the PLE instead of on television where it rightfully belongs? I ain't got the first fucking clue. I don't care that Trish is from Toronto. This had no business being on the Elimination Chamber card. You want to get Trish on the show, book her in a backstage promo or let her come out for a quick nostalgia pop and then move on. I've nothing against Trish, but I don't really clamor to see her as an active wrestler in 2025. Just been there, done that, dude. Meanwhile, you got Nia Jax, who's always a bull in a china shop. You're always just waiting for the moment she either fucks something up or yells at one of the other girls for being out of place for a spot. I still laugh every time I hear people try to defend Nia. Oh, she's getting better. She's really improved and stepped her game up since she came back. She has? Christ almighty, what was that saying about her first run? What's the grading curve we're using here? I can count on one hand the amount of Nia Jax matches I've seen in the last year that I found reasonably good. The answer is 0. Big old goose egg, daddy. And Candice sucks. I'm sorry. I don't get what the hype is with her at all. She's another one of those Triple H holdovers from a previous generation of NXT talent that pretty much still has a job because Hunter likes her. And by association, her husband. But she is beyond rotten, dude. She's not over. People do not care about her. Her work is sloppy and indie looking. Out of that giant list of roster cuts we saw in the last couple weeks, I have no idea how Candice didn't make that list. Yeah, believe it or not, I was shocked when I came back in the room in the last few minutes and saw that Candice wasn't the one doing the job. I'd have figured that was the sole purpose of putting her in the match. And instead they had Nia eat the fall. Predictably, the babyfaces won. I think it was Tiffany who got the pin. Or Tiffy, as the cool kids are calling her. Yeah, because the name Tiffy doesn't make you want to gag. Tiffy. Can't even say it without overtly mocking its stupidity. What are we, fucking 4? This is the new crop of young girls that are going to carry the load for this company in the next generation? Tiffy? Oh, God. And yet somehow people believe this chick is actually going to beat Charlotte next month. Well, you know, based on what we saw at the end of the show, I'd hesitate to call anything predictable anymore. With Charlotte Flair being involved, that's one of those I'll believe it when I see it type deals. So now that we've gotten all the girly hoopla out of the way, we can get into the real important stuff on this Elimination Chamber card. Let's talk about this unsanctioned match between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. An unsanctioned, anything goes, company is not responsible for anything these two do to each other match. In the middle of a wrestling card. Just buried right in the body of the show like it's just another regular old match. I miss the days when the unsanctioned role kind of implied lights out. Like you finish the main event, then you have the unsanctioned match after you get through all the scheduled matches on the card. At least, that's how it was traditionally done. Back when wrestling made sense. You actually want to know the funniest part of this whole thing? When they pitched the video package, which streaming on Peacock, that meant another round of commercials for me. I was like, a Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn promo package? How long is this fucking thing going to be? 45 minutes? That's a lot of goddamn history to cover in a short time span, brother. We don't have all night. I don't know what they aired, but good Lord. If they traced anything back to the Ring of Honor days, I can only think, that's a lot of content to cram into a short window. For the record, yes, I'm aware that Tony Khan owns the Ring of Honor video library, so I highly doubt there was any ROH footage in this clip. Just trying to be witty. Can't be super serious on the podcast all the time. You know, I tried to get into this match as much as I could. Between my general fatigue of no DQ garbage matches in wrestling The fact that I'm watching Owens versus Zayn on pay-per-view in the year 2025, I just had a real hard time caring about this. And I think that really was the main bone of contention when I look at everything that happened here, even omitting the stuff that actually happened in the match. I don't know how many times I've seen this match over the years, but between ROH and WWE, it's probably been at least a good dozen or so times. Maybe more if I actually care to go check the cage match database. I mean, we are talking, 15 plus years of history between these two? I always used to mildly joke about this with TNA years ago, but it's the AJ Styles Christopher Daniels dilemma. Some people don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. There was a period with TNA where it just seemed like we were constantly seeing those two wrestle one another. And while I'll agree, the matches were usually enjoyable, Daniels and AJ had wonderful chemistry together, but it just ended up getting to a point where it became the law of diminishing return. No matter how many times they ran it back over the years, you're like, God, how many times do we need to see this? It's the same exact principle to me with Owens and Zayn. We know they're best friends. Even casual mainstream WWE fans know that. But we've seen it so much. The problem then becomes, how are they supposed to top anything they've ever done previously? Especially the stuff that people considered great. Not saying there's an endless catalog of truly great Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens matches from over the years. Or El Generico, if you want to trace it back even further. Personally, my favorite match between these two will probably still be the NXT match where Owens beat Zayn to win the belt. I think it was like the month after he debuted and turned heel. Before that, God, you're probably going back to whenever they had their mask versus career blow off. Whichever final battle that was. Was that 2009, 2010? The latter match I remember was 2012, and I didn't like that match at all. That was just a garbage plunder match for the sake of having a garbage plunder match. But again, you kind of get what I'm saying, right? It's not that I'm opposed to revisiting rivalries and doing rematches over time, but the Owens-Zayn thing is just, it's been well overplayed by this point. I'm just sick of seeing it. I'm done. I don't need to watch it anymore. And the thing that was so stupid in this match, you get the announcers cracking jokes in the first 10 minutes and trying to play up a bunch of bad comedy. Like when they're crowd brawling, you got Pat McAfee saying shit like, Sammy hitting Owens with Dom Mysterio. And of course, the gag is he used a garbage can. Like a few seconds later, Michael Cole's making goofy comedy jokes. Wade Barrett's sitting there like, we're here all night, folks. And then by the time the fucking thing's over, they're trying to be all somber and serious and hush-toned, playing up the gravity and the severity of the situation we just witnessed. Get the fuck out of here. You can't go from laughing and having a good time to trying to act all stern in the span of 20 minutes. Like, people are going to say, okay, well, did you watch the match? Did you actually pay attention to what they did? Yeah. I paid attention. Tell me if I'm missing anything. They hit each other with furniture and had a relatively graphic modern-style WWE hardcore match. What am I missing out from the conversation? They use chairs, garbage cans, tables, whole 9 yards. It's not exactly groundbreaking, revolutionary stuff they're coming up with here, folks. You know, at one point they broke out a chair with barbed wire wrapped around it because why not? It already devolved into a plunder match anyway. May as well just go full ECW mode. I think if anything, the thing that really bugged me about this match, the spamming of the near falls and kickouts, it's so ridiculous. Like they're dropping each other on their heads through folding chairs, doing all these crazy table bumps, hitting their finishers on one another. They're just kicking out of shit like it's a fucking New Japan G1 final. Like, what is going on here? Now, with all my criticisms and grievances, the one thing I will never take away from Sammy, and I say this every time, no matter how much I watch him work, that guy is a masterful seller. He has the capacity to get you to feel sympathy for him anytime he's getting his ass kicked. The way he falls and crumbles to the mat, the glassy, glazed over look in his eyes. Like, that shit's always on point. You can actually buy that. And KO's a much more natural heel than he is a babyface. And I have enjoyed this delusional manic heel version of Owens we've been seeing ever since he turned on Cody and Randy last year. Like the whole thing at the end where Owens is beating the crap out of Sammy on the floor. Announcers begging for Owens to just end the damn thing and move on. Meanwhile, 15 minutes prior, they're all laughing amongst themselves like school children. But I digress. You get the series of apron power bombs from KO, throws Sammy's dead carcass into the ring, pins him 1, 2, 3. And then as Owens goes to leave, turns around and starts heading back to the ring so he can tease giving Sammy a pile driver on the concrete. And like by that point, you were just waiting for them to cue up the music because you knew exactly where it was going. Here comes Randy Orton to make the save. At an absolutely glacial, tortoise-level speed, Sammy's on the brink of being paralyzed by having his neck dropped on the concrete. Meanwhile, Randy's doing his Chariots of Fire slow-mo dramatic entrance to save Sammy from death. Never ceases to make me laugh. Orton ain't putting in any more effort than absolutely necessary, big dog. You think that guy's going to sprint down to the ring to save somebody? He didn't get paid by the hour. So, logically, Owens just lets Sammy go. Instead of pile driving him on the floor when he had an ample amount of time to do it. And here comes Orton down the aisleway, subtly selling the neck from when Owens pile drove him on SmackDown a few months back. Boy, you want to talk about milking shit. This little brawl sequence between Owens and Orton, that could have finished the entire 3-part series of the Gulag Archipelago by the time these two actually came to blows. But Orton's got to slowly walk down the aisleway. And he's got to slowly remove his ring jacket. And he's got to slowly turn to look at the crowd for feedback. He's like, should I kick this guy's ass? Should I do it? No, Randy, they just want you to stand there and jerk yourself off. So finally they go at it. Orton drops KO with an RKO. Because remember, folks, you can't spell RKO without KO. And there's your next Randy Orton t-shirt they'll be selling on Shop WWE. I'll take my royalty check in the mail. And he grabs a chair and teases he's going to blast Owens with it. But then he takes another 5 hours to contemplate before he just tosses the chair out of the ring. And then right as he's about to back up and tease giving Owens the punt kick, well, that's when security flanked the ring and hold him back. So, They let them brawl and get physical without trying to break up the initial fight, but only when Orton was about to punt Owens in the head. Well, shit, that's a bridge too far. We can't have that. Trying to end the guy's career. We're not animals here. Come on. You know, after we just saw a match where two guys were deliberately trying to end one another's career. Pro wrestling is very stupid sometimes. So Orton dropped all the geek security guys with RKOs. The best one, after he laid out like 3 of them in a row, he goes to pretend to shake one of the blonde dude's hands, and the blonde guy's actually dumb enough to reach his hand out. So then Orton just kills him. I also appreciated Randy going to tease pointing at the WrestleMania sign, and then he stopped himself and started laughing. He's like, no, I ain't doing that dumbass shit. Respect. But yeah, that Mania match is pretty much set in stone. Orton versus Owens. And I don't have a problem with that. Had to figure that was going to be the plan. I don't know what you do with Sammy in the meantime. He's sort of the redheaded stepchild in this whole WrestleMania madness. I mean, they can always try to shoehorn him into something if they're desperate to fill spots on the card, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for WWE this year. They got plenty of shit they're setting up for this 2-night perpetual marathon. But that led us to the men's Elimination Chamber. What, in an ideal world, should have been the only chamber match on the card, but got to appease womankind. Or as the Red Pill community says, the sisterhood. So the match is John Cena, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Logan Paul, and Damian Priest. At least there's some actual star power in this thing. Of course, you also have to take into account, just like what they did with the girls, everybody's got to do their long theatrical entrance. So there's another 15 minutes of wasted pay-per-view time. I find it oddly strange to see just how much heat America has with the Canadian market. I don't ever recall Canada booing the American flag whenever WWE used to run pay-per-views and television shows there in the past. Of course, I'm not fazed by it. Canada's a piece of shit country run by a pussy-whipped prime minister. So them booing America, I just find it comedic. I think when it comes to the men's chamber, the story of this match is more so about the fallout to a lot of the eliminations and trying to predict where things are going to land for WrestleMania. Let's be honest. There were primarily 2 candidates that were going to potentially win this thing. It was either going to be Punk or it was going to be Cena. Everyone else, no offense, they were pretty much fodder. Drew versus Priest looks like that's going to be the Mania match based on what they did here. Rollins and Punk is going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Whether or not that directly involves Roman in some capacity and they make it a 3-way, not exactly sure. It's also not something I particularly want to see, but I don't want to get bogged down with things. I don't know where Logan Paul lines up in all this. I think the rumor was that they were looking to do something with him and AJ Styles, which I'm not opposed to. That could be a good upper mid-card feud that does the role of filling out a big show without directly involving titles or stipulations. Kind of like what LA Knight versus AJ Styles was last year. And I really like that match. And don't get me wrong, I still like this chamber match. It's not going to win match of the year or anything, but it did its job in effectively pushing the envelope for Mania next month. Again, you had Priest stacking up McIntyre when he laid out Cena with the Claymore. And it's the second time in a month where Priest has upset McIntyre and cost him a world title shot at WrestleMania. First eliminating him from the Rumble and then eliminating him from the Chamber. So now presumably Drew's going to go complain about it on Twitter or something. Or X, whatever the platform is called now. I thought Punk was a star of the entire match. Like, just watching him inside the Chamber smack talk and stir up shit with the heels, that was great. You know, there is a part of me that still watches CM Punk matches on pins and needles, especially in these more precarious stipulation matches. But he looked good here. I thought Cena surprisingly looked the best he has in God only knows how long. Definitely had a better performance here than he did at the Rumble last month. By the time it came down to Rollins, Punk, and Cena as the final three, that's where I started getting more into the action because they had essentially gotten rid of the rest of the field that didn't matter. And this was actually really well done in terms of how they booked this. You had Rollins throw Cena through one of the pods so that way he could go back and work over Punk while he had the advantage. And those two had a decent little back and forth exchange until Cena got involved and they did that finish compilation on Rollins where Punk first hit the GTS and then Cena hit the AA. And Cole tried to paint the picture of what led to Rollins' downfall, basically equating it to if Rollins would have tried to go for a pin on Cena after he'd thrown him through the pod instead of turning his attention to Punk, well, then he wouldn't have gotten comboed at the end like he did. But with that in mind, it led to this really well-timed spot at the very end where you got Punk and Cena going at it briefly, and you see John try to lock in the STF finish on Punk, but Punk goes to try to climb through the ropes to break the hold up, and right as he kicks Cena away, he turns his head at the precise moment when Rollins comes in literally from out of nowhere, and he gives Punk the curb stomp. And at that point, you could pretty much call it. Cena jumps on the advantage while he still has it. Total babyface-like thing to do. Pulls Punk to the center of the ring. Locks in the STF for what basically amounted to a knockout victory. They had a great camera shot with Rollins' face pressed up against the side of the cage as he was watching Punk go out. That was, that was good shit. I like that little ending sequence. Not entirely unforeseen, but they did a solid job in pushing those two separate stories in their own directions for next month. And again, we still don't know how Roman's going to factor into all of it. Does he somehow insert himself into the match with Rollins and Punk, or possibly something else? Guess we'll have to see. But now we come to the moment of truth. The big moment everybody was talking about after this thing was over. And, it really is one of those things where you're experiencing an historical moment that people are going to be talking about decades upon decades from now. And on the one hand, you're trying to soak it all in and try to even process what it is you just witnessed. I always think back to Bash at the Beach 96 with Hogan turning heel and being the third man of the NWO. Like, I actually watched that live when it happened. It took me a very, very long time to process that they just turned a forever babyface heel. That's crazy. But like, even in that context, it was still different. Because in order for Hogan to truly become a bad guy, He literally had to jump ship to the opposition and spend an entire year and a half getting booed out of the building before Bischoff finally said, like, we need to make a drastic change and quick. This was different in the sense that they turned John Cena heel, but it happened in the WWE. Like, Cena didn't have to sign a contract to go work for Tony Khan and AEW in order to facilitate this. That was probably the most mind-boggling thing about it. The fact that they had this done under the WWE umbrella. God, I honestly don't even know how to start this conversation because there's so much to talk about. And on the one hand, I have so many thoughts about it. I still don't even entirely know how to process all of it. I have a lot of questions. And, while you'd think in the case of somebody like me, a guy that's never proclaimed to be a John Cena fan, in fact, I've been an avid John Cena critic for going on 15 plus years now, you would think that I'd be thrilled about this. Holy shit, they finally turned John Cena heel. This is amazing. This is revolutionary. This is going to change the course of the business forever. See, I would have said that if the year were still 2012. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of the situation. It's not 2012. It's 2025. And that's where the real issue comes in. It's not that they turned John Cena heel. It's that they turned him heel at this particular point in time when you can argue, does it really matter? Remember going back to the whole thing I was talking about with Owens and Zayn, the law of diminishing return? Let's objectively analyze this for a minute. What exactly does this even mean in the grand scheme of things? We know Cena's basically going to be wrestling for, at this point, another 9 months. He made it clear last year, 2025 is my retirement tour. My final match will be in December. After that, I'm gone. Peace out. So, you're essentially going to have John as an active talent for less than a year at this point. Now is the point where you think it's a good idea to flip him heel and have him go against everything he's ever stood for? Hogan turned heel, yes, but the guy wasn't on an active retirement tour or winding down his career full time. They had a year-plus storyline in the works where Hogan was the top villain running roughshod over WCW as the world champion. And then the payoff was them building up a top babyface to eventually take him down at the following year's Starrcade. And I'm not going to get into semantics of how that whole thing went down because that's a whole different debacle for a different day. But this is not one of those situations. John Cena is not going to be working next year's WrestleMania. So even if you went through all the trouble of having him beat Cody at Mania and then carry the belt for an entire year as the corporate heel champion who's in the pocket of Rock, your payoff for that is going to have to come well before Mania next year. And let's do a little fantasy booking since we're on the topic. And then I promise I'll actually address what went down in the final segment. Let's say, hypothetically, Cena wins the belt at Mania next month, and then he has this semi-lengthy title reign over the summer that leads into SummerSlam. What exactly is the strategy? Cena's made a couple of appearances in his alleged retirement tour just this year, and it is not in any way, shape, or form a full-time status. Because it just doesn't feasibly work with his schedule. He's too busy. He's filming movies. He's doing other outside projects that hinder his ability to work a full-time WWE schedule. So even if he wins the belt, is he going to be around weekly? Is he going to wrestle at all the intermediary PLEs between now and SummerSlam? How many of those are there? And then I guess, what? It's him and Punk at SummerSlam, and then Punk just wins the belt there? Or they do a rematch with him and Cody? There's just a lot of questionable choices regarding this whole thing that I still don't really know if they've been properly vetted or fleshed out. I guess the other thing, too, I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Why now? And I don't mean now in the sense of him turning heel when he's only got another 10 months of ring time before he retires. Why do this at the Elimination Chamber? Like, you think about the timing of everything. If you were going to do this, why would you not save this moment for WrestleMania? Because now you've pretty much stamped the outcome for what has to happen in that match with him and Cody next month. Unless there's something that I'm vastly leaving out from this conversation, Cena has to win that title in order to cement the heel turn. Elsewise, he just looks like a bum. But the fact that you pull the trigger on the heel turn a month before the actual title match, I mean, it's making the outcome so much more predictable now. Like, at least if you were going in expecting a babyface versus babyface match, and then you have Cena turn heel at the end of the match and win the belt, do the whole alignment, the whole handshake with The Rock, the endorsement, what have you. Okay, that would have been a real WrestleMania moment. It's exactly what they did with Vince and Austin all those years ago. But doing it like this? In fucking Toronto, Canada, of all places? The month before the big showdown? See, this is the problem when marks watch the product with blinders on 24/7. They're so caught up in the actual execution of the heel turn, they're not actually analyzing any of this. At least not fluidly. Now you've all but guaranteed that Cody's losing the belt next month. I do agree the idea of Cody chasing the belt is probably a better long-term timeline than him holding the belt for another year, however long they were planning on having him hold the belt. At least it gives him a new obstacle to overcome. But, well, I keep getting sidetracked. Let me at least try to talk about how they did all this, and then you can let me know how I'm off base in the comments section. The only one that dares try to be a little skeptical about this. But they set up the story ahead of time. Rock wants Cody to be his corporate champion, and he's giving him an ultimatum. He wants Cody to sell his soul, or whatever the goofy catchphrase was. And all of a sudden, Rock's been watching his Undertaker promos and decided to steal his shtick. So they do the whole rigmarole where Cena's celebrating in the ring, and out comes Cody to confront him and do the handshake deal, the sign of respect. Pretty standard stuff. And then cue up Rock's music. And whoever this fucking dweeb Travis Scott was supposed to be, another one of these sub-pop culture celebrities that 400 people know of, and WWE just assumes everybody's in touch with the modern popular stars of today's mainstream. And let me tell you all something. This guy, I guarantee you, I will bet my channel on it, this guy probably has never watched a day of pro wrestling in his life. He looked like a deer in the headlights through this whole thing. And that became evidently clear by the time they tried to have him get physical and pin down Cody with that attack angle, which I'll get into. So he just comes out and becomes a collective waste of space during the whole segment. Just awkwardly standing in the corner holding Rock's Brahma Bull belt. Looking like a fucking dork. And you eventually get Rock telling Cody that the time has come to make his decision. He wants Cody to give it to him. He wants Cody to remove his clothes and come embrace Rocky by rubbing his sweaty masculine body all over him. He didn't outright say that part, but that was the general message I was getting out of it. Sensual Rocky. Kinky Rocky. And, well, Cody basically tells Rock that he wants it all. His soul no longer belongs to him. And the reason for that is because Cody gave his soul to the people a long time ago. Then he looks at Rock and tells him to go fuck himself. Big pop for that, by the way. And again, watching this live, this whole next part of the segment was just bizarre. I could get behind the idea that Cena was working the crowd. Like, he was so overjoyed and pleased with Cody telling Rock to go piss off. And they're obviously leading you to believe that he's still a good guy in all this. Travis Scott's reaction was just stupid because, like, even he's in the corner nodding his head in approval for Cody. And I'm like, dude, you just walked out to the ring with The Rock. Clearly you are not a good guy in the overall scheme of what is happening. So this guy can't keep anything straight. He doesn't know whether he's supposed to be a face or a heel. Just a waste of space and energy. But then we get the really iconic moment where Cena and Cody go to embrace. And while Cody has his back turned to The Rock, you see Cena looking over his shoulder at The Rock with what was basically a dead, vacant facial expression. And you see Rock do the throat slash. And then Cena looks at Cody, punts him in the balls, starts beating the holy fuck out of him for several minutes, in fact. And I will concede, that actual part of the angle was extremely well done. Cena did a phenomenal job laying into Cody and just trying to make the mugging look as realistic as possible, even though his punches still look like shit. But he hits Cody with the Rolex, which, I don't know what was going on here. They've been trying to make this elaborate story over the last year where I think it's a watch that The Rock gave to Cody at some point. Apparently it was one of Dusty's old watches that he pawned, which somehow mysteriously made its way back to the hands of The Rock. I don't know how any of it makes sense, but we'll just go with it. And then Cena hits Cody over the head with the title, rips off the shirt and holds him down so Rock can take off his weight belt and start strapping Cody over the back with it. And this was the part where Travis had no idea what he was supposed to do. I'm like, dude, it's not that hard. Just hold Cody's hands down so he can't escape. But this fucking idiot is grabbing Cody by the neck, trying to prop him up as The Rock's about to whip him with the belt. And you legitimately see Cena grab Travis's hand and just tell him, hold him down. My fucking God. What an absolute dolt. Whoever made the final call to let this guy be a part of this segment, they need to be immediately terminated. And if that collectively involves Hunter and Rock, they should both be reprimanded. Because it just dragged the segment down. But Cody came up bleeding, sold the beating well. Then you get Rock, Cena, and Travis all leaving together as a bunch of officials gather around the ring and try to attend to Cody. And there's that final image of the heels standing in the aisleway. Cena side by side with The Rock. The Hollywood sellouts. Whatever you want to call them. And let me try and put a cap on this so you all know where I stand. Right now, people are praising this and glorifying it as one of the greatest moments in wrestling history. And it might be. Now, this is by far one of the biggest, most impactful moments in pro wrestling in a very long time. I would probably say it ranks among the top 5 in my lifetime. It has the potential to be viewed as an all-time great moment 10, 20, 30 years down the road from now. I just want you all to remember this. Because everybody's still on a high. Everybody's super ecstatic about the possibilities of where this is all going. Pump the brakes for a sec, because here's the skeptic in me talking. The jaded, cynical wrestling fan that's been let down for many years watching WWE. We don't know how it's going to pan out. Cena could very well end up beating Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania next month. He could become the villainous corporate heel champion. Coming out on TV with a suit and a buzz cut, cutting scathing promos on the fans, talking about how he never believed in Make-A-Wish and never believed in the kids. He was always a cutthroat politician who threw his weight around and held down future generations of talent, which is a proven fact. But, okay, beyond the aspect of what happens on the television show, let's think about the longevity of what it means for the company. I know the business is different now, but turning Cena heel even in 2025, that's a very, very big financial investment. You're sacrificing a lot. Cutting off merch sales, any of those charity services he previously did for the company. Can't do any of that shit anymore. That's out the window. But even just viewing it strictly from a booking perspective, what are you really getting out of this in a year from now? Is Cena going to retire with the belt? Is he going to somehow work as a member of the board? Like serving as The Rock's right-hand man to fuck over all the boys and create this evil billion-dollar empire with the Hollywood pairing running the show? To me, it's just... it doesn't really work the same way in 2025 as it would have had they turned Cena heel after the loss to Rock at WrestleMania 20, whatever the hell it was, 27, 28, 29. I don't even fucking remember at this point. It was so long ago. Like when he came out on Raw the following night and tried to act all humble and modest, and the fans vehemently chanted, "We all hate you." People don't remember that. But I do. That was the same night Brock Lesnar came back and beat the shit out of him and left him for dead. And Brock was supposed to be the heel. People have been sick of Cena for a very long time. And even at that point in 2012, after he lost to The Rock, everybody was saying, that's the time to do it. A fresh repackage. Going to risk it all while you still had the chance. While he was still relatively in the prime of his career. But we all know Vince was never going to do that. And by the time Cena had started working a more part-time status with the company, I think most of us just gave up hope. Just threw our hands in the air and said, well, that was a big missed opportunity. So we'll see. I reserve the right to change my mind in the future. But I'm still not entirely sure about what this is all hinting at or suggesting for the future of the company. It'll give them a lot of publicity through Mania season. But after that, you kind of start to question the validity of what they did here. Call it what you want, long-term ramifications. Like if Cena just goes away after Mania and then holds the title captive, I mean, we're right back to the same Roman Reigns dilemma during his 4-year title reign. Large stretches of time where he's just not around and not involved. And I'd hate to see that because people are legitimately going to want to tune in to see what Cena has to say. But if we go several months where he's just not on the show, it's going to be really damn hard to keep that interest going or want to see anybody take him down. And then it becomes the true definition of you can't see him. Can't see him because he's not on the fucking show. So you guys remember last week when Diesel kidnapped a cameraman and had him film while he destroyed Undertaker's coffin with an axe? Yeah, good times. It had virtually nothing to do with anything they followed up with this week's show. It was just an incredibly stupid segment that I thought was worth mentioning again. Although we did get a pretty momentous segment on this week's program. We got a Bret Hart Shawn Michaels in-ring face-off before their big showdown at WrestleMania in about 4 weeks. And you want to talk about laying the foundation for the future, brother. Even before seeing those two stand across the ring from one another, when they announced this in the cold open, I was like, oh boy. A Bret and Shawn Mexican standoff. Talk about a very edgy segment. Well, we'll break that down when we get to it. But I know what you guys are really in the mood to talk about. You want to hear my thoughts on Isaac Yankem versus Jake Roberts. There's a breathtaking matchup you probably long since forgot ever took place. Glenn Jacobs versus Jake the Snake in 1996. By the way, I missed a golden opportunity to mention this during my 96 Rumble recap. When they did that spot where Roberts put the giant python on Jerry Lawler, they should have pulled in Andre the Giant from the 89 Rumble, have Lawler eliminate himself by leaping over the top rope. Instead, he just rolled out of the ring and got eliminated a different way. Big missed opportunity there. So naturally, the story of the segment became all about Lawler freaking out over this giant sack at ringside. And Vince trying to get him all riled up by mentioning the snake every 15 seconds. It did lead to a very uncomfortable moment right before they rang the bell, where Vince goes, "Wait, what's that under the table?" Lawler goes, "Was that your foot?" Vince goes, "No, wasn't my foot." Yeah, no kidding. That wasn't a real snake. That was Vince's snake. So, for anybody that was watching the product around this time, you kind of knew what you were getting with Jake Roberts in 1996. As over as he still was, trying to get even a semi-watchable match out of him was like the literal definition of pulling teeth. And no pun intended with the Isaac Yankem reference. Objectively, it's hard to really call this match anything other than a giant, massive dud. It went maybe 4 minutes at the most. The entirety of it was Jake selling while he looked like he was in legit physical pain doing so. Then he just planted Kane with a DDT and won. Like, even watching him limp around was hard to watch at times. It kind of goes back to my whole conversation the other week about them bringing back the Warrior. As big of a star as Jake was back in the late 80s, the reality is we were not getting peak prime Jake the Snake at this point. It's the quintessential meaning of the phrase, you can try and add polish and lipstick to a pig. Fact remains, it's still a pig. No matter how you dress up the nostalgia of bringing back Roberts in the late 90s, people quickly caught on to the idea that they weren't getting the same Jake they were getting from a decade prior. Oh, and hey, speaking of the Ultimate Warrior, how about that round of fans they collected to call for Warrior's return? Probably at gunpoint. It had to be, because I could think of no other rationale to explain how they actually thought people wanted to see the Warrior back. Other than that one fan that had a sign that read, "We want Warrior." And unfortunately, we're getting him whether we like it or not. Then we went back to the ring for Diesel versus Bob Holly. It's the battle of the engine power. The Diesel versus the spark plug. And the spark plug short-circuited. This is one of those TV matches where the formatting of it made me laugh. Diesel beats the shit out of Holly for like 90% of this thing. Holly starts making a cold comeback in the last 30 seconds before the commercial break. And I say cold because when he tried to fire up the fans, nobody fucking reacted. In fact, a good handful of them booed. Because, it's Bob Holly, and he fucking sucks. And then, right as they go to commercial with Diesel getting knocked off his feet, they come back, and then Diesel just jackknife powerbombs Holly and pins him. So that basically indicates Bob Holly was such a nominal geek. His entire offensive comeback supposedly happened during the break spot when nobody saw it. Except for the fans that were in the building who were probably sitting on their hands the whole time. And then after Nash won, they had The Undertaker do some voodoo mind game trickery where he appeared in the ring after a blackout and then disappeared shortly thereafter. Then he showed up on the big screen and told Diesel that he's the master of the mind games and that he'll see him on the dark side. And I wrote down, the only talent in the history of this business that ever properly pulled off the blackout gimmick. By the way, I love how this is Taker's revenge plan over Diesel destroying his casket the other week. He's like, I'm just going to fuck with Diesel mentally by appearing and reappearing in different locations of the building. It's actually a very genius idea. Then we had an absolutely mind-boggling segment. It's one of those things where even if I attempted to explain to you what the hell was going on here, you'd still think I was making it up. Let me be very forthright, abundantly clear from the onset. Everything I'm about to address, this actually aired. I'm not exaggerating anything that I'm about to tell you. The match is Ahmed Johnson versus Shinobi. Vince explained Shinobi to the viewers watching like he'd been a recurring talent on the program for the last 4 years. And the reality is we've never seen the fucking guy before. I'm like 80% sure it was just Al Snow under another rotten gimmick. Because Lord knows he was ever going to get over his avatar. We'll just give him another totally generic martial arts gimmick and put him under a mask. So, while that match is happening in the background, they bring on Goldust via phone line. And, okay, I'm just going to be very direct when I say this. He basically spent several minutes doing phone sex while talking about wanting to fuck Roddy Piper. Again, not making that up. He talked about wanting to stick his hand up Piper's skirt while he's getting the chance to play his bagpipes. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what the hell was worse in this situation. Listening to Goldust do a modified pornography enactment, or watching whatever in the fuck was supposed to be happening in this match between Al Snow and Ahmed. You want to know what the scariest part of this whole match was? Of the two guys involved, Ahmed Johnson came off as the more competent of the two workers. Here's what I wrote down. Al does horribly fake-looking karate offense. Ahmed barely sells a thing. Snow gives Ahmed a very awkward somersault kick which barely grazed Ahmed's head. Snow slips on the top rope attempting a springboard. Ahmed hits the spinebuster and a Pearl River plunge for the 3. Hideously awful. Somebody help me out. Was Al Snow always this bad? Or did I just completely neglect how sloppy his ring work was? Now, in my defense, I never watched a ton of ECW growing up. The stuff I did watch of him in Smoky Mountain, that was also very limited. But I vaguely remember his last television match being absolutely horrendous. When you look significantly worse in the ring than Ahmed fucking Johnson, you got a big problem. Reevaluate your career, brother. This might not be for you. Whole thing was just bizarre. Even more bizarre than Mankind talking about his mother neglecting him as a child. And then talking to his pet rat George about being in physical pain. Yeah, believe it or not, this actually came across as a lucid segment compared to what we just saw in the previous 5 minutes. Why do I have no memory of Mankind ever talking to a pet rat? Was that one of those trial and error gimmicks that they kept around for a brief window and that said, yeah, this is kind of stupid. Let's ditch the rat. I remember him hanging out in the boiler room and all the disturbing, mentally deranged promos. The rat, not so much. That one kind of slipped my memory. But then we had the big face-off. The confrontation between the two headliners of WrestleMania 12. And I think the best summation I can come up with this entire segment, even before talking about what happened here, my, how quickly the landscape can change in just a year. Knowing what we do about the Bret-Shawn relationship, the hindsight of everything that went down in about a year's time span, the professional and tangible jealousy these two held for one another, in and out of kayfabe. Watching this segment in real time, it was actually quite mesmerizing. And look, I'm not going to spend the next hour doing a rabbit hole deep dive on the whole Bret-Shawn rivalry. We'll have plenty of time to cover all that over the next year, especially in the lead up to Survivor Series in Montreal. I think it's safe to say, even for where we were around this period, they were still very cordial with one another. Things hadn't escalated to the point where they were getting into fights backstage and purposefully taking underhanded shots at one another on television, going into business for themselves. It is important to remember, too, and I'm sure most people already know this, but for the hand-select group of fans that might not know, the Ironman match with Bret and Shawn was still considered a babyface versus babyface title match. Even though I think fans were more leaning into the camp of cheering Shawn, but they weren't outright rejecting Bret altogether. So, even when you have Vince asking them very basic questions, they're still surface level and respectable exchanges where Bret and Shawn are putting each other over, at the same time establishing that there can only be one top guy in the WWF. Shawn says that Bret may be the best there ever was and the best there ever will be. Only time will tell. But in terms of the here and now, Shawn believes that he's the best. And as for Bret, he's made a career on running the gauntlet and beating the best that the company has to offer. So friend or foe, Shawn will be in for the fight of his life come Mania. And of course, the whole underlying message during this back and forth, it goes back to the theme of endurance, running the gauntlet, basically foreshadowing the Ironman stipulation. So that eventually leads to Roddy Piper coming out and basically taking the piss out of Vince by grabbing the mic and telling him to bounce. I was like, has any other man in history been able to just walk up to Vince and tell him to piss up a rope and get away with it? I know Vince was still on the lower end of the totem pole in terms of being an on-screen character around this time. He wasn't the evil billionaire boss. Still, it's weird to watch when Vince had basically no authority on this program. He was just the babyface play-by-play commentator, getting jacked around by all the boys. So this is where Piper told Bret and Shawn that it's his job to ensure that people get a clean, decisive winner at WrestleMania for the belt. And there's only one way to determine who truly is the best. The only way to determine who wants it more. The man that can pick up the most falls in an hour will be declared the winner. Which, it's interesting because even when I go back and watch this segment, we all remember the Ironman match from WrestleMania. But if you ask the average person, do you actually remember how that stipulation was even added? I guarantee half the people wouldn't even know. And I'm not blaming them. It's not their fault. It's just one of those really odd stipulation matches they added that you can kind of argue one way or the other. It didn't really need an Ironman stipulation. There wasn't even any kind of fanfare for it. It was just a random announcement from Roddy Piper. Nothing in storyline ever directly led to justifying why this match needed to go 60 minutes. They just did it because why not? They have great cardio. And I have my own personal thoughts on the Ironman match and where I think it ranks among the all-time great matches, but I'll address that more when we actually review the card. Overall, it's a very fascinating segment in wrestling history. I mean, if you're watching this in real time back in 96, not knowing where things are about to go in the next 12 to 18 months, and you just think, okay, it's a very standard promo segment to help build anticipation for the title match in Mania. Man, after everything we see that goes down over the next year, especially in the lead up to Survivor Series 97, I mean, you look back at segments like this and you're like, so this is where the drama all started, huh? Now, to be entirely fair, you can debate the issues truly began after Shawn won the title and basically disrespected Bret on the spot by telling him to get out of the ring so he could celebrate. I think that's kind of where the heat really started to rise. We are still kind of in the prologue phase of the Bret Shawn biography, but the book's been open, and now it's just a matter of reliving the journey and seeing how egos and reputations can change the course of history forever. Getting real philosophical there, I know. As for the main event, it is Yokozuna versus Owen and Davey Boy in a handicap match. A rare occasion where the one guy is outnumbered, yet he still has a considerable weight advantage over the other two, which in this case was not a good thing. I mean, the match pretty much sucked. It was just a formality to lead to Vader interfering at the end for the DQ. And while the heels are ganging up on Yoko, who should run out to make the save but Ahmed Johnson and Jake Roberts, what were basically the only two babyfaces on standby this week, not named Bret and Shawn. Lord knows they were going to get involved in this fucking fiasco. Like, I can only imagine what was going through Yokozuna's mind. Oh, great, I got backup. Oh, wait, it's Ahmed Johnson and Jake Roberts. You know, on second thought, guys, just keep stomping a mud hole in me. I'll take my bets on making a comeback my fucking self. So, yeah, that was a thing. Vader got run off by Jake's python. And I don't mean that in the metaphorical sense. I meant the real one he was carrying in the bag earlier. So, I mean, this was the Mania match, right? They initially advertised Yoko and Vader in a singles match. And then I guess sanity prevailed. And Vince changed his mind and said, nope, we're going with a six-man. And now all of a sudden, I'm not too keen on the idea of making it a multi-man. At least Owen got a pay-per-view payout for it. That's the only positive I can find. Anyway, I'm going to rapid fire my way through this Billionaire Ted segment, and then we're calling it a day. Larry Fling interview with the Nacho Man and the Huckster. It sucked. They got made fun of for suffering from male pattern baldness. They made bad jokes about being run down and being over the hill. Inserted a bunch of canned fart noises because Vince. And then Huckster and Nacho Man bickered about not wanting to do a job for the other at WrestleMania. We also got incredibly insulting phony chair shots from the Huckster that set the business back about 50 years. And that was just me glazing over the content with minimal effort. If I wanted to try to bury this thing 10 feet under the ground, Oh, trust me, I could. But I don't want to give these segments more validation than required. It's like catering to girls online with OF accounts. To even acknowledge their existence is giving them more validation than what's warranted. Better to just roll your eyes and look the other way. By the way, did I mention Raw lost in the ratings to Nitro this week? Hard to believe, I know. Apparently that Ahmed Johnson Al Snow squash wasn't enough to hold the audience. I'm pretty sure everybody already got run off by the time we got the Diesel versus Bob Holly in Seg 2. Still, it's hilarious though, because as fucking atrocious as this show was this week, the mere fact that they only beat Nitro by a 0.1 rating, that's the real story of this Monday Night War saga. Nitro scoring a 3.2 win over Raw's 3.1. With that fucking abortion of a card. Unreal. But you know, we covered a lot this week. This is a very noteworthy weekend in pro wrestling history. And I think we're just going to leave the conversation at that, because you can tell my voice is shot. I got nothing left in the tank. So we're going to reconvene on Friday and get back into the flow of classic territory coverage. And seriously, by the way, feel free to share your comments about the Cena heel turn. Am I out to lunch? Is my opinion completely invalidated? Time will only tell. But right now, that's where I stand with everything. Again, it has the potential to be good. But we got to come back and revisit it after we've seen how it all develops. Everybody out there likes long-term booking, right? You hear that word getting thrown around like hamburgers and hot dogs. Well, let's see if long-term booking actually plays out. But I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Take care. Peace out.